The grand ballroom of the royal palace shimmered with golden chandeliers, the walls draped in the finest silks from distant lands. Nobles twirled and laughed, their jeweled gowns sweeping across the polished marble floor. But amidst all the grandeur, a cruel laughter echoed louder than the rest. Prince Adrian, the heir to the throne, stood at the center of the crowd, his smirk sharp as a dagger. His emerald green eyes gleamed with mischief as he pointed at a young girl standing near the entrance. "Look at her," he scoffed, his voice carrying across the room. "Her head is larger than the royal treasury. How does she even walk without toppling?" "However," the crowd burst into laughter. The girl, Alina, stood frozen, her cheeks burning with humiliation. She had come to the palace with her father, a scholar invited by the king himself. But now, instead of admiration, she was met with mockery. Alina had always known she was different. Her head was slightly larger than most, a trait that had earned her whispers and stares since childhood. But what people didn't see was the mind inside, a mind sharper than the prince's sword, filled with knowledge that could change the world. Swallowing back her tears, she lifted her chin. "Your Highness," she said, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "A great mind requires space to hold its brilliance. I pity those whose heads are small, for they must have little to think about." The laughter died instantly. A hush fell over the room. The prince's smirk faltered, his ego bruised by the unexpected reply. But before he could retort, the king himself spoke. "Well said, young lady," King Reginald mused, stroking his silver beard. "Wisdom is not measured by appearances, but by actions." He turned to Adrian, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Perhaps my son should remember that before ridiculing a guest in my house." Adrian's face flushed red, embarrassment clawing at his pride. But what happened next would change both their lives forever. The ground trembled beneath them. The golden chandeliers swayed. A deafening roar shattered the palace's elegance as the doors burst open. A monstrous shadow loomed in the entrance, a beast unlike any the kingdom had ever seen. The nobles screamed, fleeing in all directions. Guards drew their swords, but their hands trembled as the creature stepped forward. It had eyes like burning coals, a body wrapped in jagged scales, and breath that smelled of smoke and death. "The kingdom is doomed," a noblewoman shrieked. But Alina, she did not run. Her large head, the very thing they mocked, was filled with knowledge. Ancient texts, forgotten strategies, and secrets of the old world. She had read about this beast. She knew what it was, and more importantly, she knew how to stop it. She turned to the prince, her voice firm. "Your Highness, if you wish to live, you must listen to me." Prince Adrian, for the first time in his life, felt small. And in that moment he realized he was standing before a mind far greater than his own. The great beast let out another earth-shaking roar, its crimson eyes locking onto the prince as if it could sense his arrogance, his weakness. The torches flickered violently, casting monstrous shadows across the ballroom walls. Nobles scrambled, their jeweled shoes clicking frantically against the marble as they fled. Prince Adrian stood frozen, his mind blank with terror. He had spent his life in luxury, never facing anything more dangerous than a fencing match with a wooden sword. He opened his mouth to call for the guards, but Alina grabbed his wrist, her grip surprisingly firm. "Shouting won't save you," she snapped, dragging him behind a pillar. "Listen to me if you want to live." Adrian yanked his arm away. "How dare you—" "Shut up," she cut him off, her sharp eyes never leaving the beast. "That's not just any creature. It's a Drakos, an ancient guardian of lost knowledge. It doesn't attack without reason. Someone has disturbed something sacred." Adrian swallowed hard. "And how exactly do you know this?" Alina turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Because I read. Because I study instead of wasting my time mocking people." Adrian flinched. The weight of his earlier insult suddenly felt heavier than the crown he was meant to inherit. The Dracos stomped forward, its claws scraping against the marble, leaving deep grooves in the once perfect floor. The guards charged, spears aimed at the beast's chest. No. Alina cried, but it was too late. With a single swipe of its tail, the Dracos sent the soldiers flying like rag dolls. They crashed against the pillars and walls, their armor crumpling like paper. The nobles, who hadn't already escaped, now screamed. in horror, rushing for the exits. The beast lifted its head and let out a deep guttural growl, a sound that vibrated through the very bones of the palace. Then, to everyone's shock, it spoke. "Where is it?" Its voice was like grinding stone, ancient and filled with fury. Silence fell. The king, standing atop his throne platform, stepped forward, his face pale but composed. "What do you seek, Great One?" The Dracos turned its gaze to the king. "A stolen book, taken from the forbidden archives. Return it, or your kingdom burns." Alina's heart pounded. She knew exactly what book the beast was talking about. The forbidden archives contained the kingdom's oldest, most dangerous texts. Knowledge that was never meant to fall into the wrong hands. Someone had stolen from it, and now the kingdom was paying the price. She turned sharply to Adrian. "Your Highness, this is your palace. Do you know anything about a missing book?" Adrian hesitated. No. He stopped mid-sentence, realization dawning in his eyes. Alina caught the flicker of guilt on his face. Her stomach dropped. "You know something." Adrian swallowed hard, his throat dry. "My tutor, Sir Roderick, he said he found an interesting book in the old archives last week. He took it to study. I didn't think—" "You didn't think at all," Alina snapped. "That book belongs to the Dracos. We need to get it back before it decides to destroy us all." The Dracos let out another warning growl. The palace walls trembled. The air grew thick with smoke as the beast prepared to unleash its wrath. Alina grabbed Adrian's hand again, this time with no patience for his protests. "Come on. If we don't return that book now, there won't be a kingdom left to inherit." For the first time in his life, the prince let someone else take the lead. And together, they ran. The corridors of the palace stretched long and dark ahead of them, the only light coming from the flickering torches mounted on the walls. Adrian's breath came in ragged gasps as he struggled to keep up with Alina's swift pace. He had never run this fast in his life. He had never needed to. "Where exactly are we going?" he panted, nearly stumbling over his own feet. "The royal library," Alina shot back. "If your tutor took the book, he either still has it or he left clues behind. Either way, that's our best chance." Behind them, the monstrous roars of the Dracos shook the palace. Distant screams and crashing sounds echoed through the halls as the beast grew impatient. They had little time. As they reached the towering double doors of the library, Adrian threw his weight against them, pushing them open. They stepped inside, the scent of old parchment and ink filling the air. The moonlight spilled through the grand stained-glass windows, casting colorful shadows across the endless rows of bookshelves. Alina wasted no time, rushing toward the wooden desk at the center of the room, the place where royal scholars worked. Papers were scattered everywhere, but one thing stood out immediately, an old dust-covered book bound in cracked leather. It was open, its ancient pages filled with strange symbols and unreadable text. "There it is," Adrian exclaimed, reaching for it. Alina yanked his hand back before he could touch it. "Don't be an idiot," she hissed. "That book is cursed. That's why it was locked away in the forbidden archives." Adrian's face paled. "Key cursed?" "Yes," she said sharply. "And if we don't return it exactly the right way, that Dracos out, they won't just destroy the palace. It'll tear this entire kingdom apart." A deep, menacing voice cut through the silence. "Then perhaps I should keep it." Both Alina and Adrian spun around. Standing in the doorway was Sir Roderick, the prince's tutor. But something was wrong, terribly wrong. His eyes, once a dull grey, now glowed with an eerie blue light. His fingers twitched unnaturally, and his expression was twisted into a sick grin. "You," Adrian breathed. "You stole the book," Sir Roderick chuckled darkly. "Stole? No, my dear prince. I liberated it. This kingdom has hoarded power for centuries, keeping knowledge locked away from those who truly deserve it." He took a slow step forward, his gaze locked onto Alina. "You, girl, you understand, don't you? You see the value of knowledge. Why should we return this book when we can wield its power instead?" Alina's blood turned cold. She had spent her whole life seeking knowledge, longing to be respected for her mind. But she knew one truth above all: knowledge in the wrong hands was as dangerous as any sword. "You're a fool," she said. That book doesn't belong to us, and if we don't give it back, we won't live long enough to regret it. Sir Roderick's grin widened. Oh, but you're wrong, child. I have already begun to unlock its secrets. Then, before either of them could react, he raised his hand, and the entire room exploded with dark energy. Books flew from their shelves, the stained glass windows shattered, and the air itself crackled with magic. Alina and Adrian were thrown backward, landing hard against the marble floor. Through the ringing in her ears, Alina heard the distant roar of the Dracos. It was coming, and if they didn't stop Roderick now, nothing would be left to save. The ground trembled beneath them as dark energy surged from Sir Roderick's fingertips, twisting through the air like living shadows. The very walls of the royal library groaned, bookshelves toppling over as the curse within the ancient book came to life. Alina struggled to her feet, her head spinning. Across from her, Adrian groaned, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. But there was no time to check on him. The Draco's roar thundered through the palace, growing closer. If they didn't stop Roderick now, the beast would destroy everything. "Sir Roderick, please," Adrian called out, staggering forward. "This isn't power. It's destruction. You have to stop." But the man laughed, his eyes glowing brighter. "You still don't understand, do you, boy?" His voice echoed with an unnatural resonance, as if something ancient and malevolent had taken root inside him. "This book contains the knowledge of forgotten gods. With it, I will reshape this kingdom in my image." Alina's heart pounded. She had read about magic like this, magic so old and dangerous that even the kingdom's greatest scholars had feared to speak of it. If Roderick had already tapped into its power, reasoning with him was no longer an option. They had to take the book back. She turned to Adrian, whispering urgently, "We need to separate him from the book. If we can break his connection to it, the spell will collapse." Adrian swallowed, eyes flickering with uncertainty. He had spent his life relying on others to fight his battles, but now the fate of his kingdom depended on him. Before he could answer, Roderick raised his hands again, dark tendrils of magic whipping through the air. "You will not interfere." A blast of raw energy shot toward them. Alina barely had time to shove Adrian aside before the force struck the ground between them, sending cracks through the marble floor. Dust and debris filled the air. "Enough games," Roderick snarled, stepping closer. "Bow before your new ruler and perhaps I will spare you." Alina clenched her fists. "I'd rather bow to the Dracos." Adrian's eyes widened. "That's it," he muttered under his breath. She turned to him, confused, but Adrian was already moving. He sprinted toward the shattered window, cupping his hands around his mouth. "Great Dracos," he bellowed, his voice echoing through the ruined halls. "Your book is here. The thief stands before us." For a brief moment, everything went still. Then, boom! The ceiling above them exploded inward as the massive form of the Dracos crashed through the palace, its molten eyes locking onto the book in Roderick's hands. The air burned with its fury, its wings stretching wide enough to block out the moonlight. Roderick's face twisted in fear. "No, no, I control this power now." He raised the book, chanting in a forgotten language. The shadows around him thickened, but the Draco's was faster. With one mighty sweep of its clawed hand, it struck Roderick, sending him flying across the room. The cursed book tumbled from his grasp, landing at Alina's feet. She didn't hesitate. Scooping it up, she turned to the Dracos and with steady hands held it out. "It was never ours to keep," she said. "Take back what belongs to you." The Dracos lowered its great head, inspecting her with burning eyes. Then, with surprising gentleness, it took the book within its clawed grasp. The moment it did, the air shifted. The darkness that had seeped into the palace began to fade, the eerie glow in Roderick's eyes vanishing. The tremors stopped, the magic broken. The Dracos exhaled, a deep, rumbling sound that shook the very bones of the palace. It turned its gaze to Alina and Adrian, studying them for a long moment. Then, with a mighty beat of its wings, it lifted off the ground, taking the cursed book with it. Within seconds, it was gone, vanishing into the night sky, leaving only silence in its wake. Adrian collapsed onto the floor, breathing heavily. "That was terrifying," Alina smirked, wiping the dust from her sleeves. And yet, you managed not to wet yourself. I'm impressed, Your Highness." He shot her a look, but found himself laughing. Because, for the first time in his life, he had done something that truly mattered. From the far side of the room, Sir Roderick groaned, barely conscious. The king's guards, now recovered from the chaos, rushed in to seize him. King Reginald himself entered. Moments later, surveying the destruction with unreadable eyes, then he turned to Alina, nodding with solemn respect. "You saved this kingdom tonight." Adrian stood beside her. "She did more than that, Father. She taught me what true strength looks like." Alina raised an eyebrow at him. "Does that mean you won't be mocking my head anymore?" He chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. "I think I've learned my lesson." The king smiled, then looked at Alina. "This palace needs more minds like yours. If you're willing, I would grant you a place in my royal council." Alina's eyes widened. She had spent her life being mocked, underestimated, and now she was being offered a seat at the table of rulers. She met Adrian's gaze, then nodded. "I'd be honored." As dawn broke over the kingdom, the palace stood battered but standing. The Dracos had returned to its slumber, the cursed knowledge once again sealed away. And in the ruins of a once grand ballroom, a prince and a scholar stood side by side, forever changed by the night the beast came.